The October sun hung low over Cedar Falls, Montana, painting the cracked pavement of Maple Street in shades of bronze and rust. A cold wind swept down from the Rockies, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke from distant chimneys and the promise of an early winter. On the curb in front of a sagging two-story house with peeling yellow paint, a little girl sat alone. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them like she was trying to hold herself together. Her name was Lily Morgan. She was 5 years old, and she had already learned that the world did not see her. She wore a faded blue dress, 2 sizes too big, hemmed crudely with safety pins her last foster mother had never bothered to replace with thread. Her sneakers were scuffed and splitting along the sides, the laces knotted in places where they had broken. Her hair, a soft wheat color, was tangled at the ends because no one had brushed it that morning. No one had remembered. Lily held a small gray stone in her palm. She had found it yesterday near the mailbox. It was smooth and cold and perfect, and she had decided it was a treasure. Her collection of treasures was small: a blue jay feather, a piece of sea glass from a class trip to a lake, a pink ribbon she had fished out of a gutter, all of them hidden in a shoebox beneath her cot upstairs, safe from the hands of the other foster children who took things without asking. Through the screen door behind her, she could hear Mrs. Gower's voice rising and falling on the telephone. Angry, always angry. Lily had learned to read the shape of that anger by its rhythm. When it sped up, it meant Mrs. Gower was about to open the fridge for another beer. When it slowed and dropped low, it meant she was about to end the call and start looking for someone to yell at. That was when Lily would vanish. She was very good at vanishing. She had learned to take up less space than a shadow, and to move through a house without making the floor creak, and to eat quietly enough that no one remembered she was still at the table. These were the skills of a foster child who had been in 3 homes in 1 year. A motorcycle rumbled somewhere at the end of the block. Lily lifted her head. She liked motorcycles. They sounded the way freedom must sound, big and low and alive. She had ridden in a car with bad brakes, and a truck with no heat, and a minivan with stains on every seat, but she had never been on a motorcycle, and in her private imagination, the people who rode them were the kind of people who got to decide where they went. Lily Morgan at 5 had never decided anything. Every house she had lived in had been chosen for her by a stranger with a folder, and every folder had failed her in a slightly different way. She was about to lay her cheek on her knees again when a black van slid around the corner at the far end of Maple Street. It moved slow, too slow. The windows were tinted so dark she could not see inside. The engine hummed low like a wasp circling something soft. Lily's stomach tightened, though she did not know why. She was 5. Fear for her was still mostly a feeling in the belly that came before the words arrived to explain it. The screen door banged open behind her. "Lily, get in here right now." Mrs. Gower's voice cracked like a whip. Lily stood quickly, brushing the dirt from the back of her dress. The gray stone was still in her hand. The black van accelerated. It happened in seconds. Tires squealed. The side door slid open with a sound like something breaking. A man in a baseball cap, his face pale and panicked rather than cruel, jumped from the van and seized her by the arms. He lifted her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. Lily's mouth opened to scream. No sound came. The gray stone dropped from her fingers and rolled into the gutter, lost forever. At that exact moment, a black Harley-Davidson turned onto Maple Street from the opposite direction. The rider was a big man in a worn leather, cut, his gray beard trimmed close to his jaw, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. The patches on his vest marked him as Hell's Angels. His name was Ray Dalton, and he was 58 years old, and he had spent the better part of 2 decades riding from one nothing town to the next, because nothing towns did not ask him questions he could not answer. Their eyes met, just for a second, just long enough for Ray to see the terror in the little girl's face, the way her small hands clawed uselessly at the air, the way her mouth shaped a scream that could not escape her throat, and just long enough for Lily to see him, a stranger on a roaring machine looking right at her as if she mattered. Then the van door slammed shut. The van lurched forward, the tires spun and bit, and Lily was gone. Ray sat on his idling Harley at the intersection for a long moment after the van disappeared. The street was quiet again, too quiet. A curtain twitched in the window of a house down the block. Then it stilled. A jogger crossed at the far end. No one had seen it, or if they had chosen not to see it. Ray's hands flexed on the handlebars. The leather gloves creaked. He told himself it was not his business. He told himself these small towns had their own problems, and he had his own, which was to reach the Flathead Valley chapter house before nightfall and drink until the memories went quiet. He told himself the girl probably had people. Someone would notice. Someone would call. But he had seen her eyes. Brown. Wide. Not crying. Not yet. Just absolutely, utterly alone in the middle of her own terror. Ray Dalton had seen those eyes before in a photograph he had stopped looking at 15 years ago, because looking at it broke something inside him that no amount of whiskey could set back in place. His daughter Emma. She had been 5 when leukemia took her back in 2005. She would have been 25 this fall. She would have been a woman. She would have been a whole person. Instead, she was ash in a small urn on a shelf in his sister's house in Billings, and he was an old man on a motorcycle who had not been a father in so long that he had almost forgotten the shape of the word. His hand moved on the throttle before his mind made the decision. The Harley roared. Ray pulled a hard U-turn in the middle of Maple Street, tires barking against the asphalt, and swung east after the van. He kept back. 200 yards. 300. The van was not racing. Whoever was driving was trying to look ordinary, which told Ray 2 things. They had a destination, and they were not professionals. A professional would have switched vehicles within a mile. A professional would have a second driver meet them at a rest stop and take the child on a different highway. A professional would not be sitting at a stop sign for a full count of 3. Whoever had that girl in that van was making it up as they went. That was good for the girl and bad for everyone else, because amateurs panic, and panic is what kills children. They passed the edge of Cedar Falls and rolled out onto County Road 14, a 2-lane strip of cracked blacktop that wound up into the foothills through Tamarack and Lodgepole Pine. Traffic thinned, then vanished. Ray dropped back further, riding on the shoulders of curves, so he could disappear from the rearview mirror. His knee ached where an old crash had left the cartilage thin. He ignored it. The van turned off onto a dirt road. Ray rolled past the turn, parked the Harley behind a stand of scrub pine, and walked back with a pair of old Bushnell binoculars he kept in his saddlebag. The dirt road climbed up a rise and dipped. Through the glasses, Ray watched the van pull into the yard of an old farmhouse. A faded red barn leaned beside it. A broken windmill creaked in the breeze. 2 figures got out of the van, a man in the baseball cap, a woman in a gray cardigan. The man carried Lily in his arms awkwardly, like a man who had never held a child. The woman fumbled with the screen door with her free hand twice before she got it open. They were shaking. Even through the binoculars, Ray could see they were shaking. Neither of them turned back to look at the road. Ray lowered the binoculars. The sun was already on the last quarter of the sky. He had maybe 2 hours of daylight. He waited. When the long shadow of the barn reached the road, he walked his Harley another half-mile up into the trees and hid it under a tarp he pulled from his pack. Then he moved on foot through the underbrush, boots silent on the soft pine needles circling the property, the way a man circles a fire he is not sure he can trust. The farmhouse was old, not abandoned, but close to it. One loose shutter banged in the wind. A rusted tricycle lay on its side near the porch. That tricycle stopped Ray in his tracks. It was too small to belong to whoever lived here. It looked like it had been there a long time. The rubber on the back wheels had rotted. The red paint had faded to pink. Someone had stopped noticing the tricycle a year ago, maybe 2, and had left it where it fell as if moving it would be an act too large to bear. A kitchen light came on, then a bedroom light upstairs. Ray settled into the shadow of a cottonwood tree at the edge of the yard. The October evening turned the sky the color of bruised apricot. He pulled his jacket tighter and watched. Inside the farmhouse, a very different scene was unfolding than the one Ray had imagined. The woman whose name was Diane Whitmore was kneeling on the kitchen floor in front of Lily. Her hands were shaking. She was not trying to tie the little girl up. She was trying to button an old cardigan around her thin shoulders. "It's cold in the house, sweetheart," Diane said. Her voice was hoarse. It was the voice of a woman who had been crying for months and had not quite stopped. "We'll turn the heat up. Are your feet cold?" Lily did not answer. She stared at the woman with eyes that had gone very large and very still. She had stopped trying to cry in the van. Crying had never helped anything before. "I know you're scared," Diane said. She reached up with one finger and tucked a piece of Lily's hair behind her ear. Her finger trembled. "I know. I am too." The man in the baseball cap came into the kitchen then. His name was Carl Whitmore. He had taken the cap off, and in the kitchen light you could see the gray at his temples and the tired lines around his mouth. He was not a cruel-looking man. He was a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had begun to bend under it. "Diane," he said softly. His voice cracked on her name. "Diane, what did we do?" "Not now, Carl." "Diane." Not in front of her. Carl looked at the little girl. His eyes filled. He pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth and walked back out of the kitchen without another word. Diane turned back to Lily. She tried to smile. The smile did not quite work. "Are you hungry, honey? I bet you're hungry. I made soup, chicken soup. Do you like chicken soup?" Lily did not answer. Diane waited, then nodded as if an answer had come. "Okay, let's get some soup in you, and then we'll figure out what to do." Outside, in the cottonwood's shadow, Ray had moved to a new position near the kitchen window. The window was cracked an inch at the bottom. The words drifted out on the warm air from the stove. What he heard made no sense. He had followed a kidnapping. He had expected a threat. A gun, a rope, a voice raised in cruelty. Instead, he was watching a woman button a child into her cardigan and ladle chicken soup into a chipped blue bowl. "Careful, it's hot. Blow on it like this." Ray's jaw tightened. He had spent 40 years reading people, in pool halls and prison yards and the gravel lots behind biker bars. He knew what predators looked like. He knew what cruelty smelled like close up. This woman was not a predator. This woman was something else. This woman was broken. He circled the house, slowly keeping low, and found a window that looked into the living room. On the end table beside a lamp stood 3 framed photographs. Ray eased his penlight from his pocket and used the edge of his hand to cover the beam as he shone it through the glass. A family at a lake. Carl, Diane, and a small girl no more than 3 years old. The girl had dark hair and a crooked grin that was missing a front tooth. A second photograph. The same girl, older, maybe 4, in a hospital bed. Thin, bald, still smiling, holding up a stuffed rabbit. A third. Just Carl and Diane, standing in a cemetery, their arms around each other, their faces hollowed out like the insides of dead trees. Ray clicked off the pen light and stood very still in the dark. He understood then. Not all of it, but enough. He stayed there through the long, cold evening, moving only when he had to, watching shadows pass across curtains, listening to the small domestic sounds of a house pretending to be normal. He watched Diane run a bath. He watched her emerge with Lily in an oversized nightgown, the little girl's hair damp and neatly combed. He watched Carl come to the kitchen door and stand in it for a long time, his shoulders shaking, his face in his hands. At some point, Ray realized he had not moved in an hour. His back ached. His feet had gone numb. He did not care. He was remembering Emma, the smell of her hair after a bath, the way she had held his finger in her whole hand, the last time he had seen her alive in the hospital bed tubes in her arm, whispering "Daddy" through lips so dry they cracked. And he had been there. He had held her hand, but he had not saved her. He had not been able to save her. He had told himself on the long, empty roads after the funeral that he would never again love something he could not save. He had ridden for 20 years on the back of that promise. Now he was crouched in the dirt outside a stranger's farmhouse because a little girl with brown eyes had looked at him for 1 second and made him feel something. Around 10 o'clock, the downstairs lights went out one by one. Ray gave it another 40 minutes. Then he moved. The back door of the farmhouse had an old pin tumbler lock. He picked it with a bent paper clip and a thin piece of steel in under 2 minutes. The hinges creaked as he eased it open. He froze, waited. No footsteps, nothing. He slipped inside. The kitchen still smelled of chicken soup. A single bulb glowed above the stove. 2 cups sat in the drying rack. A small plastic cup next to them, pink, with a cartoon elephant on the side. Ray stared at that cup for a long moment before he moved on. The hallway ran straight to the staircase. He placed each boot carefully, letting his weight settle before lifting the next foot. 40 years of riding had taught him how to move when it mattered. At the top of the stairs, 3 doors. One open, a bathroom. One closed at the end, a line of faint blue nightlight seeping under it. One closed on the right, silent. The master bedroom, he guessed. He eased open the door on the left. The room was small, the walls were pale yellow. Faded butterfly decals crawled across one wall, the kind a mother puts up for a little girl. A twin bed stood against the window, and in the bed, curled on her side, Lily slept, the oversized nightgown puddled around her, her small hand clutching an empty pillow where a stuffed animal should have been and wasn't. Ray crossed the room in 3 steps. He knelt beside the bed. He lowered his voice to the softest thread he had ever used in his life. "Lily, honey, wake up." Her eyelashes fluttered. "Lily, I'm a friend. I'm going to take you somewhere safe." Her eyes opened. In the faint blue light of the nightlight, he saw the exact moment her brain registered a stranger kneeling beside her bed. A big man, broad shoulders, a gray beard. Not Diane, not Carl, a stranger. Her mouth opened. "Mommy," she said. The word hit Ray like a hammer. "Mommy." It got louder. "Mommy." Footsteps in the hallway. A woman's voice. "Lily, baby, I'm coming." Ray had a half-second to decide. Run or hide. He could not run carrying a screaming child. He slipped behind the door of the closet and eased it shut just as the bedroom door flew open. Diane ran into the room in a flannel nightgown. She caught Lily up in her arms. Lily threw her arms around Diane's neck and clung to her like a drowning child to a rope. "Mommy, there was a big man, Mommy." "Shh, shh, there's no man. You had a dream. You had a bad dream." Carl crashed in a second later, wild-eyed, gripping an aluminum baseball bat. "Where?" "She had a nightmare. She's okay." "There was a man," Lily wept. "He said he would take me home. I don't want to go home. I want to stay here." Diane's face broke. Carl went through the room anyway. He looked under the bed. He looked behind the curtains. Ray heard the closet doorknob start to turn. Then Lily's voice muffled against Diane's neck. "Carl, please, don't leave me." The doorknob stopped. Carl stepped back. "It's all right, baby," he said. "It's all right." They rocked her together, the two of them sitting on the edge of the twin bed, whispering to her. Ray stood 6 feet away, behind the closet door, and listened to his own breath and the pounding of his own heart. It took 20 minutes for Lily to sleep again. 20 minutes during which Ray Dalton, Hell's Angels, 58 years old, stood in a dark closet and listened to a woman who was not Lily's mother sing the same lullaby his own late wife had sung to Emma a lifetime ago. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray." When Diane's voice finally dropped to silence and Carl whispered, "Let her sleep," they left the bedroom. But they did not go back to their own. They walked down the hall, down the stairs, into the kitchen. Ray waited 5 full minutes. Then he slipped out of the closet, out of the bedroom, and crept halfway down the stairs to where he could hear them. They were sitting at the kitchen table. Carl had made tea. Neither of them was drinking it. "We have to end this," Carl said. "Tonight, we have to call someone and say what Carl, we took a child, we stole her." "Yes, Diane, that is exactly what we have to say, because that is exactly what we did. We were going to take Ellie Henderson. Yes, we were going to commit a felony against a different child. That is not a defense. We were going to ask for enough money to save the house and disappear. We would not have hurt her. That does not matter in a courtroom, Diane." There was a long silence. "She told me," Diane said quietly, "that at her last foster home they made her eat dinner alone in the bathroom because she was too quiet and they said it was creepy. She told me, Carl. She told me in the car on the way home when we were deciding what to do. She just started telling me, like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to ask." Carl put his head in his hands. "I called the Henderson house," he said after a long moment. "I thought I was calling the right number. I had the address right. I had the daycare pickup time right. Everything. But we were at the corner of Poplar and it was the wrong corner. It was a block off. We grabbed a foster kid from a foster home. There is no ransom coming. Nobody is calling the police. I checked. Nobody has reported her missing Diane. Nobody is looking for her." Ray's hand gripped the banister so tight it hurt. "Then nobody will know," Diane whispered. "Don't. Nobody will know, Carl." "Diane, stop. Sophie was 5, Carl. Sophie was 5 and now she is under a stone and I can't. I can't, Carl. I can't put another 5-year-old girl into a car and hand her back to people who make her eat in a bathroom." Carl was crying now silently, shoulders shaking. "Then what do we do, Diane? Tell me. Tell me what we do. Because we cannot keep a child. We cannot keep a child." Diane did not answer. Ray backed up the stairs one careful step at a time. He slipped out the back door, relocked it behind him with the paper clip, and walked back into the woods. He sat on a fallen log in the moonlight for a long time. Cold crept up through the seat of his jeans. He did not feel it. He thought about Emma. He thought about the foster home Lily had come from, the one where a child had to eat in the bathroom because being quiet was creepy. He thought about the 2 broken people at the kitchen table inside the farmhouse who had committed a crime and then discovered they could not complete it because the universe had handed them not a rich man's grandchild, but the last girl in America nobody would miss. The right thing was to ride into Cedar Falls at dawn and call the sheriff. That was the right thing. That was the lawful thing. Ray Dalton had not been a lawful man in a very long time. but he still knew what lawful looked like. The right thing would put that child back in the system that had put her on that curb alone at sunset at the age of 5. Ray rubbed his face with his hands. "Emma," he said to the empty woods. "Emma, baby, tell your daddy what to do." The woods did not answer. They never had. But the wind moved in the pines, and he sat and he breathed, and after a long time he made a decision. He would not call the sheriff. Not yet. He would go back tomorrow. He would find out who these people were. He would find out who Lily was, and then he would decide. He made his way back to the Harley and bedded down beside it under the tarp. He did not sleep much. Just before dawn he did sleep, and in that short sleep he dreamed of Emma for the first time in 7 years. She was 5. She was wearing a pale yellow dress. She was standing in a kitchen he had never seen, holding the hand of a little girl he had only ever looked at once through a van door for a single second. In his dream, Emma looked at him. She did not say anything. She just looked at him. Her eyes were full of a question he could not hear the words to. When he woke, the sun was rising, the frost had laced every blade of grass around him silver, and he knew what he was going to do. He was going back to that farmhouse, and he was going to play the oldest card in the biker's deck. Broken bike, kind stranger just passing through. He was going to get inside that house and figure out what to do about a little girl named Lily. He waited until the sun was well up before he rode the Harley slowly back down the dirt road. 200 yards from the farmhouse, he pulled over, popped open the toolkit, and pulled the coil wire loose from the spark plug. The engine coughed and died. Perfect. He walked the bike the rest of the way. Carl was in the yard splitting kindling with an axe that was older than he was. He looked up sharply at the sound of boots on gravel. Ray saw him see the patches on the leather cut. He saw him stiffen. He saw Carl's right hand shift on the handle of the axe. Ray stopped well short of the yard. He spread his hands slightly. "Morning," he said. "Sorry to trouble you. Bike quit on me about quarter-mile back. Hoping you'd let me use a phone." Carl did not move. "No phone out here." "Water, then," Ray said. "Long walk back to town." Carl watched him. A woman came onto the porch. Diane. She had the haunted eyes of a person who had not slept. She held a dish towel in her hands. Behind her in the doorway a small face peeked out. Lily. Her eyes widened when she saw the motorcycle. Then she saw Ray. She stared at him for a long second, tilting her head slightly the way a bird tilts its head at something it half remembers. "Mommy," she said, tugging on Diane's cardigan. "Mommy, that man has a motorcycle." Diane's hand closed tight on her shoulder. "Lily, honey, go in the house." "But Mommy, his motorcycle." "Inside, please." Lily vanished back through the door. But Ray had seen her, and he had seen her see him, and something in him had opened like a door opening a crack. Carl lowered the axe. "There's a spigot around the side," he said, his voice tight. "Help yourself, then you'll be on your way." "Appreciate it," Ray said. He walked around the side of the house past the rusted tricycle and pretended to drink from the spigot. Through the kitchen window he could see Diane dropping to one knee in the kitchen, gripping Lily by both shoulders, whispering fiercely into her face. He could not hear the words. He did not need to. He knew what they were. Don't talk to strangers. Don't tell them your name. Don't tell them anything. When he came back around the front, he made a show of trying to start the Harley. He tinkered with the coil. He frowned. He shook his head. "Ignition coil," he said to Carl, who was still standing in the yard with the axe. "Bike's done for today. I can walk to town, but it's a ways." Carl said nothing. From the porch, Diane said quietly, "Carl." Carl turned to look at his wife. Something passed between them. A whole conversation in a glance. Two people who had lived inside the same grief for a year and knew each other's thoughts without words. What it said Ray could not tell, but Carl's shoulders dropped an inch. "There's an old barn. Carl said, not quite meeting Ray's eye. Got a cot in it. If you can find parts in town tomorrow, we won't stop you from staying the night. That's kind of you, Ray said. My name's Ray Dalton. Carl hesitated. Then, Carl, this is my wife Diane. Ma'am? Diane did not answer. She just watched him with those hollow, exhausted eyes. And somewhere behind her in the house, a small voice said, curious and clear as a bell across the morning air, his motorcycle is big like a bear. Ray Dalton stood in that farmyard, and he felt something crack open in his chest that he had sealed shut 2 decades ago. He did not let it show on his face. He just nodded once at Diane and walked his broken motorcycle toward the barn. He had no plan. He had no right to be here. He had lied to get in the door. But he was inside now, and he was not leaving that little girl behind. The barn smelled of old hay and diesel, and something sweeter underneath that Ray could not name until the second morning when he saw the small boot prints pressed into the dust near the back wall. Children's boot prints, very small. Sophie's, he understood, the little girl in the hospital photograph. This had been her playhouse once. Nobody had swept the dust since. He understood then why Diane did not come into the barn. He spent the first full day fixing things that did not need to be fixed as hard as he fixed them. The water pump behind the kitchen had been dribbling for months. Ray pulled it apart on a square of canvas in the yard, laid the pieces out in order, and explained each one to Carl like a patient teacher. Gasket, valve seat, impeller shaft. Carl hovered at his elbow, handing him tools, saying little. By mid-afternoon, water ran clean and strong through the kitchen tap for the first time since Diane could remember. She came to the kitchen door and watched the water fall into the sink as if it were a small miracle. Thank you, she said quietly. Ray wiped his hands on a rag. It was nothing. It was something, she said and shut the door. Lily watched from behind the door curtain. She did not come outside that first day, but he saw her face in the window more than once. The second day, he was halfway up a ladder nailing a sheet of flashing onto the porch roof when he felt eyes on him and looked down. She was standing at the foot of the ladder in an oversized pink sweater. She held out a glass of water in both hands, the way you give something precious to someone you do not yet know. Mommy said to bring this to you, she said. Ray came down the ladder slowly. He did not want to scare her. He took the glass and sat on the top porch step so he would not be taller than she was. Thank you, Lily. You're welcome. She stood very still, studying him. Then she pointed at his vest. What's that? It's a vest, like a jacket with no sleeves. Why does it have pictures? The pictures mean I belong to a club. Like a team. Yeah, like a team. She considered this. I don't have a team. Well, Ray said, his voice rougher than he meant it. Some people get teams and some people get families. Families are better, I think. Lily thought about that. Then she said very seriously, I don't have one of those either. Ray looked at his hands. His hands were not steady. He pretended to adjust the grip on the water glass. You do now, kid, he said, for a little while anyway. She looked at him for a long time. Then she walked up the porch steps, past him into the house, and closed the door behind her. A minute later, he saw her peek out through the window again. She waved. He waved back. She vanished. That was the afternoon she decided to call him Mr. Bear. It happened at dinner. Diane had tried to protest when Carl invited him to the table, but only with her eyes, and the eyes had lost. Lily had clambered onto the chair nearest the guest without being told. She looked at Ray for a long second, weighing something. I'm going to call you Mr. Bear, she announced, because you have a beard and a motorcycle and you're big like a bear. Lily! Diane said, a warning, not quite sure why it was a warning. It's all right, Ray said. Mr. Bear's a good name. Lily nodded, satisfied. She poked her green beans. Sometimes bears are scary, but some bears are nice. My book at the old house had a nice bear. Mommy, do we have the bear book? The word mommy fell in the kitchen like a plate breaking. Carl's knife stopped moving. Diane looked down at her plate. A long breath moved through her. Then she said, "No, honey, we don't have that book, but I'll look for one in town." Ray ate his pot roast. He did not look at Carl. He did not look at Diane. He watched Lily move a potato around her plate, and he thought, this cannot go on. Somebody is going to break. It was Carl who broke first 2 nights later on the porch in the dark. Ray had stepped out to smoke. He did not smoke often anymore. The cold snapped back the years. He was leaning on the railing, watching his breath cloud in the porch light when the door opened behind him, and Carl stepped out with 2 tin cups of coffee. Carl handed one over without a word. They stood in silence for a while. "Sophie was 4, Carl said, finally looking out at the dark. "I saw the pictures," Ray said. Carl nodded as if he had known Ray had seen them. "Leukemia. They said we caught it early. They said the odds were good. For 18 months we lived in a hospital. Diane slept in a chair. I drove back and forth from my job at the mill an hour each way and slept in a different chair on the weekends. We went through the insurance. Then we went through the savings. Then we went through the house equity. Then we took loans we shouldn't have taken. And then Sophie started getting better, and then she got worse, and then she was gone." He took a sip of coffee. His hand shook slightly. "Diane quit her job to be with her at the end. I couldn't work either. Grief is a physical thing, Ray. It sits on your chest. It's a weight. People don't understand. They think it's a feeling. It's not, it's a weight." "I know," Ray said quietly. Carl looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. "I had a daughter," Ray said. "Emma, she was 5, same thing, different year." Carl closed his eyes for a long moment. "Oh, Ray. Long time ago now." "It doesn't matter how long ago," Carl said. "No," Ray agreed. "It doesn't." They stood in the cold and drank their coffee. "The bank sent the second foreclosure notice last month," Carl said. "They give you a grace period, and then they don't. Diane has not slept a full night since Sophie died. I have not seen her laugh in almost a year. And one night, about 3 weeks ago, we were eating cereal for dinner because there was nothing else in the cupboard, and we saw on the news that a little girl from a wealthy family in the next county had been at her grandparents' house, unsupervised, and something broke in me, Ray. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought if we could just get enough money to keep the house, if we could start over. I don't know what I thought." "You thought you could outrun it," Ray said. "Yeah." Carl's voice was very low. "Yeah, I thought I could outrun it. You can't." "I know that now." Ray turned to look at him. "Carl, you grabbed the wrong kid." "I know." "There's no ransom." "I know." "What's the plan?" Carl was silent. "Carl, what is the plan?" Carl put his hands on the porch railing and gripped it so hard his knuckles went white. "Diane won't give her up, Ray." "Carl, she won't. She's the only thing that has made Diane eat a whole meal in a year. You don't understand. I've watched my wife starve. Grief starves you. She has been dying in front of me for a year and a half. And this week, I heard her laugh. I heard her laugh, Ray. I forgot what it sounded like. I thought I had imagined it. And I cannot be the man who takes that away from her." Ray was quiet. Then he said, "You have to." Carl pressed his hand to his face. "There's a way," Ray said. "There's a right way to do this. Not a perfect way, a right way." Carl did not look up. "Tell me." "You turn yourselves in, voluntarily, with a lawyer at your side, before anyone comes looking. You tell them everything. You tell them about Sophie. You tell them about the bank. You tell them about the mistake. And you tell them that the minute you had her in the car, you knew you couldn't do it. They'll send us to prison. Maybe, maybe not. Voluntary surrender is a different animal than getting caught. Judges see it different. Juries see it different. You have a story, Carl. A real story. A heartbreaking story. And the little girl. She is going to tell the court exactly how you treated her. Exactly. You know what she's going to say." Carl looked up. His eyes were wet. "She's going to say you were the kindest people she ever met," Ray said. "That's what she's going to say. It's still a kidnapping." "It is. And there is no world where that disappears. But there is a world where this ends with you both coming home again. And the other world, Carl, is the one where some deputy spots your wife at the grocery store 6 months from now with a little girl who's missing off a database, and they come through that door with guns drawn, and Lily spends the rest of her life scared of flashing lights. That is the other world. You pick." Carl said nothing for a long time. "I know a woman in town," Ray said. "Martha Hollings. Runs the diner. She's got a nephew in Missoula, family lawyer. Good man, apparently. I'll go see her tomorrow. We can set this up quiet. Careful. Make sure Lily is taken care of. Make sure her next place is a real place, not a holding cell for a kid nobody's bothering to look for." "Diane will never agree." "Diane will agree when you ask her," Ray said, "because Diane is a mother, and a mother does the hardest thing for her child." Carl put his face in his hands and cried without sound for a long time. Ray let him. After a while, Carl wiped his face on the sleeve of his flannel shirt and said thickly, "Will you sit with me when I tell her?" "I'll sit with you." Diane took it worse than Carl had. She did not yell. She did not throw anything. She sat very still at the kitchen table after Carl was done, and her face went still in a way that reminded Ray of people who had just been told someone had died, which was in a way what she had been told. A second daughter had been given to her, and a second daughter was about to be taken away. "How long," she said finally, "how long will they give her to us before they come?" "Diane." "How long, Carl?" Ray said very gently. "A week, maybe 2. I don't want to rush it. I want to set it up right. Lawyer meets with you first. Social worker meets with Lily first. Places her in a proper home before any charges are filed. That takes time." Diane nodded once. "I want to make her a birthday cake," she said. Carl looked at her. "Honey, her birthday is in April." "I don't care. I want to make her a birthday cake." "Okay, Diane. And I want to buy her a backpack. For school. A red one. So wherever she goes next, she has something nice." "Okay. And I want to take her picture. Only one. Just one, so I can keep it." Carl reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "Okay, Diane," he said. She nodded. She cried. She did not make a sound. Ray rode into Cedar Falls the next morning. The town had maybe 2,000 people. A single stoplight at the main intersection. A feed store. A post office, a Lutheran church, and Martha Hollings' diner on the corner of Main and 2nd, a squat brick building with a neon sign in the window that read, simply, Hollings. Martha herself was behind the counter. She was 65 years old, wide-shouldered with white hair chopped short, and a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. A widow for 10 years. She had raised 3 sons on her own. She was a woman who took the measure of a man in about 4 seconds. She took Ray's measure as he walked through the door. "Hell's Angel," she said, pouring coffee before he reached the counter. "Thought I smelled one. Sit down." "Ma'am." "Don't ma'am me. Sit." He sat. She put the coffee in front of him and folded her arms. "You passing through, or is something wrong?" "Something's wrong." She nodded once. "Thought so. You got the look of it. Booth in the back. Go." She took the pot to finish the morning refills. Then she hung a back in 10 sign on the door and came and sat across from him with her own cup of coffee and a pen and a little notebook she pulled out of her apron pocket. "Talk," she said. Ray talked. He told her all of it. Not the kidnappers' names. Not yet. But the shape of it. The little girl on the curb. The van. The broken people with the child-sized cup in the drying rack. The plan. Martha listened without interrupting. Her pen moved steadily across the notebook. Her face did not change. When he was done, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Raymond, you realize you are describing a federal crime." I realize that. And you realize that by not reporting it immediately, you have made yourself an accessory. I realize that too. And you realize that if this goes wrong, the fact that you are a Hell's Angel means that every cop in this county will assume you were the one who planned it. I know how it looks, Martha. Do you? I do. All right then. She put her glasses back on. My nephew Daniel. He's a lawyer in Missoula. He owes me a favor on account of I raised him for 2 years when his mother drank herself into Warm Springs. I'll call him. He won't like it, but he'll come. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She looked at him over the glasses. You understand you are choosing the hardest path here. The easy path is you ride to the sheriff right now. Deputies roll in. Kid goes to a temporary placement. Couple goes to jail. You ride off. Done. I understand. You understand why you're not doing that. Because the easy path sends her back to a home where she eats dinner on the bathroom floor. Martha's eyes flickered. That detail had hit her. She said it to Diane. Diane told Carl. Lord have mercy. Martha stared at her coffee for a long moment. Then she looked up. All right. I've got a girl at the county office, Casey Belden, Family Services. Decent woman, not a paper pusher. She'll meet with the child. She'll fight for a real placement. You surrender these people through Daniel, you let Casey get ahead of the system with the kid, and you have a chance of coming out of this with 3 people not destroyed. That's what I'm trying to do. 3 people. She looked at him hard. Not 4. He met her eyes. What do you mean? You, Raymond. You keep riding once this is done. You hear me? You're not the hero of this story. You're the man who made it end less badly. Then you get on that motorcycle and you leave that little girl to the people who can legally take care of her. Am I clear? He did not answer right away. Raymond. I hear you, Martha. Good. She stood. Come back Thursday. I'll have Daniel on the phone. Now drink your coffee. You look terrible. He drank his coffee. He ate a piece of pie. He left a 20 on the counter. He rode back to the farmhouse. For 3 days after that, the farmhouse felt almost like a home. Carl and Ray finished the roof. Diane baked a birthday cake on Tuesday chocolate with pink frosting and 5 candles Carl had found in a drawer. They sang to Lily. They told her it was an early birthday, a special one just for her. She blew out the candles with enormous seriousness. She made a wish. She would not tell them what it was. Ray brought her a stuffed rabbit from the dry goods store in Cedar Falls gray with floppy ears. She named it Hopper. She carried it everywhere. On Wednesday evening, Ray sat on the porch with Diane while Carl read to Lily in the living room. The wind had come up from the mountains. The sky was full of stars. I am going to do this, Diane said, staring straight ahead. I want you to know that. I am going to stand there in front of a judge, and I am going to say what I did, and I am going to ask the court to do what is right for her, whatever that is, even if it isn't me. Ray was quiet. I just want one more Saturday, she said. That's the only thing I'm asking you for. One more Saturday. Can you give me that, Ray? Saturday morning, pancakes, cartoons. She loves cartoons. Nobody ever let her watch cartoons. She asked me if we had cartoons. Can you imagine? 5 years old and she has to ask permission to watch cartoons. Saturday, Diane. One more Saturday. I'll make the call to Martha on Monday morning. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. I do, Ray. I do need to thank you. Because you could have called the police on Sunday night and you didn't. You gave us this week. This week is the reason I will be able to do what I have to do on Monday. Without this week, I would have run. I would have taken her, and I would have run, and it would have been the worst thing I ever did. So thank you, Ray. Thank you for this week. Ray could not speak. He nodded. In the living room, Lily was laughing at something Carl was reading. A high, bright, unguarded laugh. The laugh of a child who did not know what Monday was. On Friday afternoon, Ray rode into town to meet Daniel Hollings. Martha sat them in the back booth of the diner. Daniel was 40, thin, sharp-eyed, with a lawyer's haircut and a lawyer's patience. He listened to Ray the way his aunt had, without interrupting, writing neat notes on a legal pad. When Ray was finished, Daniel put down his pen. "I want to be very clear about what I'm signing up for here, Mr. Dalton." Ray, I'm going to represent Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, not you. Do you understand that? If any of this turns against you, I cannot defend you. Understood. I need to meet them. Tomorrow. I'll drive out. I'll take their statements myself. I'll prepare a voluntary surrender document that we will walk into the sheriff's office together on Monday morning. Before that, we will have already spoken to Casey Belden at Family Services. The child will be transferred into her custody directly at the sheriff's office, not at the farm. The transfer has to be calm. No uniforms at the farm. That's the plan. Good plan. Stupid plan, but good plan. Daniel closed his notepad. Ray, one last thing. If anything about this leaks before Monday, a neighbor, a mailman, anyone, the whole thing falls apart. Voluntary surrender has to be voluntary. The moment law enforcement knocks on that farmhouse door first, your friends are common kidnappers, and everything I just told you becomes worthless. Do you understand? I understand. Keep them inside. Keep the child away from windows. No trips to town. No neighbors. Not one more day. Not one more day, I hear you. Daniel stood, shook his hand. I'll see you tomorrow at noon. Martha walked Ray out to his bike. At the curb, she put her hand on his arm. You've done good, Raymond. We're not done. No, she said, we're not. He rode back to the farmhouse as the sun was setting. The air was sharp with the promise of frost. As he came around the last bend of the dirt road, he saw something that did not fit. A pickup truck parked on the shoulder 50 yards short of the farmhouse. Empty. Cold engine. Ray slowed the Harley. His hand went instinctively to the clutch. He scanned the tree line. Nothing. He scanned the farmhouse porch. Empty. But there, standing at the edge of the yard by the mailbox, frozen like a deer, a man. 60s. Wind jacket. Binoculars hanging around his neck. A birder, maybe. Except he was not looking at birds. He was looking through a camera lens at the farmhouse porch, where through the bay window, clearly visible, Lily was standing on a chair, helping Diane water a potted plant. The man saw Ray. At the same instant Ray saw him. He dropped the camera. He ran for the pickup. The engine caught on the first crank. The truck fishtailed in the gravel and screamed away down the road. Ray stood astride the idling Harley in the middle of the dirt track. Cold dread crawled up his spine. He had seen the man before. 2 days ago. At the post office in Cedar Falls, pinning up missing children flyers. Ray's phone was in his pocket. Martha's number was in it. He could call. He could warn Daniel. He could get them ahead of this. He pulled the phone out. No bars, no service, not out here. He gunned the Harley up to the farmhouse. He burst through the front door. Pack a bag, he said to Carl. Pack one bag, for her, right now. What? Diane said. Someone saw her. Someone took a picture. I don't know how much time we have, maybe hours, maybe minutes. I don't know. We are going to the sheriff's office tonight. Tonight. Diane's face went white. Tonight, Carl said. Tonight, Diane, I'm sorry, tonight, get her coat. Diane ran up the stairs. They could hear her moving fast, throwing things into a bag. They could hear her voice too loud and too bright telling Lily they were going on a little trip. They could hear Lily's confused, small voice. They could hear Diane's voice break. Ray grabbed Carl by the shoulders. Listen to me. When we get in the van, you drive. I'll follow on the bike. We go straight to the sheriff's office in Cedar Falls. We stop nowhere. Do you hear me? I hear you. Martha will call Daniel. Daniel will meet us there. It will not be as clean as we wanted, but it will still be voluntary. We will still walk in under our own power. Do you hear me? I hear you, Ray. Carl, look at me. You did not fail. You did the hard thing. You did the right thing. It just moved up a few days. That's all. Carl nodded, His eyes were wet. Diane came down the stairs with Lily in her arms. Lily was holding the rabbit. She was holding it very tight. She looked at Ray over Diane's shoulder. "Mr. Bear," she said, "are we going on your motorcycle?" Ray swallowed. He could not speak for a second. "Not today, kid, but soon, I promise, not today." They were halfway across the yard to the van when the siren started. Not one, not two, four at least, coming up the dirt road at speed. Carl stopped dead. Diane gripped Lily so tightly Lily made a small sound of protest. "Ray," Carl said. His voice had gone flat empty. "Ray, what do we do?" "Stay still," Ray said. "Don't run. Nobody runs. Carl, do you hear me? Nobody runs. Hands visible." The first cruiser came over the rise of the hill. Then another. Then another. They came in hard and fast. 3 cruisers, an unmarked SUV, a van from child services bringing up the rear. The doors flew open before the vehicles had fully stopped. Deputies spilled out, rifles up, handguns drawn, shouting. "Down on the ground, hands behind your heads." Ray went down to his knees immediately, hands laced behind his head. He had done this before. He knew the drill. Carl went down next, trembling. Diane did not go down. She stood in the middle of the yard with Lily in her arms, her face white, her eyes enormous. She did not seem to hear them. She was looking at the child services van. "Ma'am, put the child down. Put the child down now." "Diane," Ray said from his knees as quietly and as steadily as he could. "Diane, put her down. It's all right. Put her down." Lily understood before Diane did what was happening. She understood it the way only a child in the foster system can understand it. She had been taken from places before. She began to scream. "No, no, Mommy, no, Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear." "Lily, honey, shh, shh, it's gonna be okay." A deputy reached them. A female deputy. She was not unkind. She was trained for this. She knelt and tried to take Lily gently. Lily clawed at Diane's cardigan. Diane would not let go. She could not let go. Her body had stopped obeying her. Ma'am, I have to take her. Let go now, please." "I can't," Diane whispered. I can't. Another deputy took Diane's arm. And another. They pried Lily from her. It was not brutal. It was worse than brutal. It was methodical. Lily's fingers opened one by one. "Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear." She was reaching for him, over the deputy's shoulder, her small arms stretched out, her fingers open, her face wrecked. Ray, on his knees in the dirt with the deputy's knee in his back, could not move, could not even reach up. He could only meet her eyes. "I'm here, kid," he said, his voice cracked. "I'm here. I see you. I see you. I'm not going anywhere. Do you hear me? I'm not going anywhere. Mr. Bear, I'm coming back for you, Lily. You hear me? I'm coming back." The cuffs bit into his wrists. A deputy lifted him roughly to his feet. Somewhere behind him, Carl was being pulled up from the ground, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Somewhere behind that, Diane was on her knees, making a sound that was not a word and not a scream, but something underneath both. And Lily was being carried toward the child services van, her arms still stretched back over the deputy's shoulder, her mouth still shaping the same 2 words. "Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear." The van door slid shut. The last thing Ray saw before they put him in the back of the cruiser was her small hand flat against the van window, pressed there like a starfish, and her mouth still moving. He could not hear her anymore. He could only see the shape of it. "Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear, Mr. Bear." And then the van pulled away, and she was gone. The holding cell in the Cedar Falls Sheriff's Department smelled like bleach and old coffee. The overhead light never went off. There was no clock. Ray did not know how many hours he had been there. He had stopped counting after the 3rd time a deputy walked past without answering him. He sat on the metal bench with his back against the cinder block wall and his hands on his knees. His leather cut had been taken, his wallet, his belt, his bootlaces. He sat in his undershirt and his jeans and his unlaced boots like a man who had been stripped of everything that identified him as himself, which was, he supposed, the point. He did not cry in the cell. He had done his crying out in the world where crying was still allowed. What he did in the cell was remember. He remembered Emma at 3 fishing with him on the Yellowstone, her pink life jacket, her pigtails, the way she had screamed with delight when he had pretended to fall out of the boat. He remembered Emma at 4, her first day of preschool, holding his hand so tight. He remembered Emma at 5, thin as a shadow, whispering daddy into the pillow of a hospital bed. He remembered riding away from her funeral, 200 miles that day, 400 the next, 800 the day after that, as if distance was a thing that could be put between you and what had happened. He remembered 20 years of gravel lots and neon bar signs and the backs of strange women and the smell of road rash. He remembered Lily's hand flat against a van window. At some point in the small hours, he heard boots in the hallway. He did not look up. He had stopped expecting anything. "Mr. Dalton," a woman's voice, old, sharp. "Mr. Dalton, lift your head. You look like a man at his own funeral. You're not dead yet." Ray lifted his head. Martha Halling stood on the other side of the bars. She was wearing her church coat, which Ray had never seen before. Her gray hair was pinned up. In one hand she carried a manila envelope so thick it was strained at the seams. Behind her stood Daniel in a suit, and a thin man in a sheriff's uniform Ray recognized as Captain Reyes, who was apparently the chief investigator on the case. "Captain Reyes," Martha said, "I would like you to open this gate and take these cuffs off my friend." "Martha." "Don't Martha me, Roger. You ate at my counter for 30 years. You'll stand there and you'll listen. This man is not a kidnapper. This man was 3 days away from walking a voluntary surrender through your front door. He contacted a lawyer. He contacted a family services supervisor. He has done more for that little girl in 1 week than your department has done in 5 years. Martha. I have his phone records. I have it on 2 security cameras at my diner. I have a typed statement from Casey Belden saying this man called her Monday morning to inquire about emergency placement. I have Daniel's notes from yesterday. I have everything, Roger. Everything. She pushed the manila envelope through the bars at him. Read it, or don't. Either way, you are going to let him out of this cell tonight because he has not committed any crime that an honest reading of the law can convict him of, and I swear on my late husband's grave that if you hold him 1 more hour, I will call every reporter between here and Spokane. Captain Reyes took the envelope. He looked at it. He looked at Ray. He looked back at Martha. He sighed. I've been reading the file, Martha. I don't need the speech. You're getting the speech anyway. I've noticed. He unlocked the cell. Mr. Dalton, you are being released without charges, pending further investigation, which I have a feeling will not go anywhere. There are some people here who would like to talk to you before you leave, not as a suspect, as a witness. Ray stood up slowly. The little girl, he said. His voice came out cracked. Where is she? She is in emergency placement tonight. Tomorrow she will be transferred to a long-term foster home in Ridgewood. Ridgewood is 4 hours away. It is where there is a bed, Mr. Dalton. It is not my call. Captain, Ray said, I want to apply for guardianship. The silence in the hallway lasted a full 5 seconds. Captain Reyes actually laughed, not unkindly, just surprised. Mr. Dalton, I don't think you understand how this works. I understand how it works. I want a form. I want whatever form a person who is not a relative fills out to become a legal guardian of a child in the foster system. Mr. Dalton. Captain, Daniel said quietly, stepping forward, my client would like a form. Your client. Mr. Dalton retained me this morning. I am his counsel. Daniel, you're representing the Whitmores. I'm representing Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore in their criminal case. I am now representing Mr. Dalton in a separate family court matter. No conflict of interest. I'll handle the waivers. Captain Reyes rubbed his face with both hands. You people, he said. You are going to give me an aneurysm. Get out of my station, all of you. I will have someone call you about statements tomorrow." Martha drove Ray home. Home for that night meant the spare room above her diner, a small room with a single bed, a lamp, and a window that looked out over the main street of Cedar Falls. Martha made him a sandwich he did not eat. She made him a cup of tea he did not drink. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table, and she let him be quiet until he was ready. "Raymond," she said finally, "I told you in this diner not a week ago that you were not the hero of this story. You did. You didn't listen." "No, ma'am." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand on top of his. "Good," she said. "Good." He slept that night for the first time in 4 days. Deep, black, dreamless sleep. When he woke, the sun was already high and the smell of bacon was coming up through the floorboards, and for one confused second he thought he was a young man again. Then he remembered. Then he got up. The fight began the next morning. Daniel sat Ray down at the back booth of the diner, a fresh legal pad in front of him, and laid it out without mercy. "Ray, what you are asking me to do is frankly close to impossible. A single man, 58, with a criminal record for assault and 2 old possession charges, no wife, no current residence, no steady job, patched-in member of a motorcycle club classified as an outlaw organization by the Department of Justice. You are asking me to convince a Montana family court judge to place a 5-year-old foster child in your care." "Yes." "Ray, Daniel, you tell me what it will take. You tell me and I will do it." Daniel sighed. He flipped to a fresh page. "Okay, listen to me. Carefully. First, you sever from the angels, formally, in writing. You turn in your cut. You provide documentation from the chapter president. Judges hate that patch. It is the single biggest obstacle you have. Done. Second, you get a lease on a real residence, not a motel, a house, preferably in a decent school district, preferably within an hour of where the child services are administered. Done. Third, you get a job, a regular job, paychecks, something a social worker can write down in a report. Done. Fourth, you submit to a psychological evaluation and to drug and alcohol screening ongoing for a year. Done. Fifth, you present to the court in your own handwriting a statement of why you believe you are capable of parenting a child who has been through severe trauma. A real statement, not one a lawyer writes for you, one you write from your own life, which means, Ray, you will have to tell the court about Emma. Ray was silent for a long moment. I'll write it. Sixth, and this is the hardest one, you are going to have to wait. Because even if you do all of that, you are looking at 8 months minimum before any court in this state will consider letting you past a supervised visit. In those 8 months, Lily will be with another foster family. You will not be able to have her. Do you understand that? I understand. Ray, it might not work. You might do all of this and still lose. Ray looked at him. Then I'll have done all of it, he said, and I'll still have lost. That's not the worst thing. The worst thing is not doing it. Daniel nodded once slowly. All right, he said. Then we start. Ray rode up to Missoula 2 days later. He sat down in a meeting room at the chapter house. He handed over his cut folded neatly, his patches still sewn to it. He signed the papers the chapter president put in front of him. Nobody yelled at him. Nobody tried to stop him. A few of the older brothers shook his hand. One of them, an old road captain named Dutch, put a hand on Ray's shoulder and said quietly, You go do right by this kid, Ray. That's the only thing that was ever worth riding away for. Ray rode back to Cedar Falls in a denim jacket with no patches on it, and for the first time in 35 years, he felt the wind through his shoulders like a stranger. He rented a small frame house at the edge of Cedar Falls, 2 bedrooms, a yard, a maple tree in the back. He got a job at Henderson's garage on 2nd Street, which he had in fact been qualified to do since he was 20 years old and had never quite gotten around to doing. The owner was a Vietnam vet named Patch Henderson, who did not care about Ray's history and cared a great deal about the fact that Ray could rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. Ray worked 6 days a week. He was home by 6:30 every night. He stopped drinking. He painted the second bedroom pale yellow, because that was the color in every memory he had of a little girl's room that had ever mattered in his life. He wrote the statement to the court. It took him 4 weeks. He wrote it in pencil on yellow legal pads. He wrote about Emma. He wrote about the day she was born and the day she died, and about the 20 years in between that he had spent running. He wrote about what he had seen in the back of that black van. He wrote about a child sitting alone on a curb in a town whose name he had not known, and a girl named Lily Morgan saying his motorcycle looked like a bear. He wrote, "I am not asking the court to believe that I am the right man to raise this child. I know what I look like on paper. I am asking the court to let me try, because 20 years ago, another little girl needed me, and I did not know how to be there for her. And now there is a little girl in this state who I can be there for. I cannot undo the first thing. I can only do the second." He handed Daniel the pages. Daniel read them. When he was done, he took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. "That's the one, Ray. That's the statement we send." Carl and Diane's case came up first, in December. Daniel represented them well. Diane's therapist, hired with money Martha had quietly raised among the Lutheran Ladies' Auxiliary, testified about complex grief disorder and bereavement. Carl testified, shaking about everything. He did not try to hide anything. He did not try to make excuses. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Judge Whitaker, listened to all of it. Then she sentenced each of them to 5 years, suspended with 3 years of intensive psychological treatment, 400 hours of community service each, and 10 years of probation. She also ordered at Daniel's request, and over the prosecutor's objection, that they be allowed to send and receive mail from Lily Morgan, and if and when the child's legal guardian agreed, supervise visitation. At the bench, before she dismissed the court, Judge Whitaker took off her glasses and said directly to Carl and Diane, "I have sat on this bench for 22 years. I have never heard a kidnapping case like this one. I want you both to go home, not to prison, home. And I want you to go to therapy, and I want you to grieve your daughter properly, and I do not want to see you in this courtroom again. Is that clear?" They could not speak. They both nodded. Outside the courthouse in the snow, Diane walked up to Ray and hugged him without saying a word. She hugged him for a long time. Then she stepped back, and Carl shook his hand, and they got into their old pickup truck and drove home to a farmhouse that was emptier and quieter than it had ever been. The bank had given them a 60-day reprieve on account of the case. Martha had also quietly organized the Lutheran ladies on that front. Ray did not ask too much about it. You do not ask too much about what Lutheran ladies organize. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for March. Ray visited Lily once in February under supervision at a family services office in Ridgewood. He had not seen her in almost 4 months. When he walked into the small playroom with its plastic chairs and its toys chosen by a committee, she looked up from a coloring book, and for one terrible second, she did not recognize him. He had shaved his beard. He was wearing a blue work shirt and a denim jacket without patches. He looked like somebody's grandfather. He said gently, "Hey, kid." She stood up very slowly. She came toward him 1 step at a time. She stopped about 3 feet away and studied his face with those enormous brown eyes. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "Mr. Bear." Ray went down to 1 knee. He did not trust his legs. He held out his arms, and she came into them, and she did not cry. She just pressed her face into his jacket and stayed there for a long time while a social worker pretended to take notes in the corner. She had lost weight. Her new foster home was not a bad one, the social worker told him. It was just not a home where a small, quiet child got particularly noticed. Lily had stopped speaking almost entirely. She had begun wetting the bed. She had nightmares about black vans. In the playroom, she did not tell him any of that. She just held the rabbit Hopper, who was dirtier than he had been. And she asked him, "Did you come back?" "I came back. For real. For real. Like you said. Like I said." "Are you going to take me with you?" Ray's throat closed. He had been warned not to make promises. "Not today, honey, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it every day. Do you understand?" She thought about that. "Okay," she said. And she laid her head on his shoulder, and the social worker turned her face away and blew her nose quietly into a tissue. The hearing took place on March 14th, a Thursday, in the family court of Flathead County. It was closed to the public. It was overseen by a 70-year-old judge named Harold Brennan, a man known locally for being strict fair and utterly immune to theatrics. Daniel presented his case with meticulous calm. He put Ray's employment records in front of the judge, his lease, his drug and alcohol screening results all negative, his resignation letter from the Hells Angels stamped and notarized, his psychological evaluation, the statement in his own handwriting, all 4 weeks of it. He presented character letters from Patch Henderson at the garage, from Martha Hollings at the diner, from Carl and Diane Whitmore, which the judge read with a strange expression, from Ray's older sister in Billings, who had driven 6 hours in the snow to sit in the courtroom. The county attorney objected to everything he could object to. He reminded the court of Ray's assault conviction from 1993. He reminded the court of the Patch former or not. He pointed out that Lily Morgan had already formed an unhealthy attachment to Ray under highly irregular circumstances. Judge Brennan listened to all of it. His face gave away nothing. When both sides were done, the judge took off his glasses and folded his hands on the bench. "I would like to hear from the child," he said. There was a startled pause. "Your Honor," the county attorney said, "she is 5 years old." "I am aware, Counselor. Is she here?" "She is in a waiting room, Your Honor," the social worker Casey Belden said. "We thought in case you wanted." "Bring her in, please." Casey brought her in. Lily was in a red corduroy dress with white tights and little black shoes. She held Hopper. She walked into the courtroom and she saw Ray and she stopped. "Hi, Lily," Judge Brennan said. His voice was not a judge's voice. It was a grandfather's voice. "My name is Harold. I am the judge. That means I am the man who helps figure out what happens next. Is that okay with you?" Lily nodded slowly. "Can you come stand up here with me?" Casey walked her up to the bench. The judge leaned down so that his face was level with hers. "Can you tell me, Lily, who that man is, the one in the blue jacket?" Lily looked at Ray. "That's Mr. Bear," she said. "And who is Mr. Bear?" Lily thought for a long moment. She hugged Hopper against her chest. "He's the one who came back," she said. The courtroom was very quiet. "Lily," Judge Brennan said gently, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there is no wrong answer. Do you understand?" "Yes." "If the grown-ups could pick any place for you to live, where would you like to go?" Lily did not hesitate. "With Mr. Bear." "Why, honey?" She looked at her shoes. She whispered something. The judge leaned closer. "What was that, honey, you can tell me?" "Because Lily said he's the only one who said he would come back and then did. Ray Dalton, 58 years old, 30 years in the wind, sat in a Montana courtroom and covered his face with his hands and wept silently into them." Judge Brennan straightened. He cleared his throat. "Thank you, Lily. You did a wonderful job. You can go back with Ms. Belden now." Casey led her out. At the door, Lily turned. She looked at Ray. She waved once, a tiny half wave with Hopper's paw. Ray waved back. The judge looked at both counsels. I am going to grant temporary guardianship to Mr. Dalton for a period of 12 months with monthly review by Family Services. At the end of that 12 months, if Ms. Belden's reports continue to be satisfactory, I will entertain a petition for permanent guardianship. I want a home visit conducted before placement. I want Mr. Dalton to remain in his current employment. I want to see the child in this chamber every 6 months in a non-adversarial setting so I can watch her grow up a little. Are we clear, counselors? Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Good, we are adjourned. He brought her home 3 weeks later. Spring had begun to work its way into the Montana foothills. The last snow had melted off the south-facing slopes. The cottonwoods along the creek were beginning to leaf. Ray drove up to Ridgewood in Patch Henderson's borrowed station wagon because his motorcycle was not a vehicle for a 5-year-old girl, and he signed the papers, and he buckled Lily into the back seat with Hopper in her lap and a pink backpack Diane had given her months before beside her. They drove south through the mountains as the sun came up. Lily did not talk for the first hour. She watched out the window. She held Hopper. Ray did not press. He had learned patience in 100 places in his life. None of them had taught him patience like the last 4 months had. Somewhere past the pass as they came down into the valley, and the light began to slant long and gold across the fields, Lily said, "Mr. Bear." "Yeah, kid." "Do you have cartoons at your house?" Ray's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He smiled. He kept his eyes on the road. "Kid," he said, "I got every cartoon. I got so many cartoons you're not even going to believe it." She was quiet a moment, then she said, "Okay." And he looked in the rearview mirror and she was smiling. A small smile, a careful smile, a smile that did not entirely trust yet that it was allowed, but a smile. He turned onto Route 35. The sign for Cedar Falls was 11 miles ahead. The house waited for them at the end of a quiet street. The maple tree was budding. Martha's blue pickup was in the driveway because Martha had, of course, filled the refrigerator that morning and left a casserole on the stove. On the porch sat Patch Henderson with his youngest grandson, a boy about Lily's age, who had come, Patch had explained, because every new kid needed a kid on the first day. Daniel stood by the mailbox in jeans looking like a lawyer trying to look like a regular person. And at the far edge of the yard, keeping a respectful distance, stood Carl and Diane Whitmore. They had asked if they could come. Ray had said yes, but at the edge of the yard, Diane, "I'm sorry." Diane had nodded. It was enough, she had said, just to see her arrive. Just to see her walk into her home. That was enough. Ray parked the car. He got out. He opened the back door. He unbuckled Lily. He lifted her out and set her down on the sidewalk in front of the house. She held his hand. She looked at the house. She looked at the porch where Patch's grandson was already waving, and Martha was wiping her eyes on her apron, and Daniel was standing very still with his hands in his pockets. She looked at the edge of the yard where Diane was standing with both hands pressed to her mouth and tears running down her face, and Carl had his arm around Diane's shoulders. Lily saw them. Her grip tightened on Ray's hand for just a second. Ray knelt down. "Honey," he said, "those are your friends, Carl and Diane. They love you very much. And the court said they can come visit sometimes if you want, only if you want." Lily looked at him. "They were sad," she said. "Yes, they were." "Are they still sad?" Ray looked over at them. "A little less sad today, I think." Lily thought about that. Then she let go of his hand and walked across the yard, and when she reached Diane, Diane went down on her knees in the grass and held her carefully with the kind of fragile care you use for something you have already lost once. Lily pressed her face into Diane's shoulder for a long moment. Carl stood and cried without sound. Then Lily stepped back, and she touched Diane's cheek with one small hand, and she said something only Diane could hear, and Diane nodded. And Lily came back across the yard, and she took Ray's hand, and she looked up at him. "Mr. Bear," she said, "I'm home now." Ray picked her up. She was so light. She was so impossibly light. She put her arms around his neck and her cheek against his beard, and he stood in the front yard of a small rented house in Cedar Falls, Montana, with his eyes closed and his face wet and the wind in the maple tree, and his whole life finally at last, after 20 years, stopped running. Inside the house on a shelf Ray had built himself out of pine from the lumber yard, 2 photographs stood side by side in matching wooden frames. One was of a little girl in pigtails holding a stuffed rabbit taken at a lake in Montana in the summer of 2005. The other was of a little girl in a red corduroy dress taken that morning at the courthouse holding the same stuffed rabbit, or close enough the same in the ways that mattered. Ray carried Lily up the porch steps. Patch's grandson stood up and said, "Hi, I'm Tyler. You want to see the yard?" And Lily looked at Ray, and Ray nodded, and she slid down out of his arms and took Tyler's hand tentatively, the way she took all things tentatively, and they went around the side of the house toward the backyard where the maple tree was. Ray stood on his own porch. Martha came up and squeezed his arm. "Raymond," she said. "Martha, you did it." "We did it." "No," she said firmly, "you did it." She walked past him into the house to set out lunch. Daniel followed her in gently, as if something fragile had been set down that he did not want to disturb. Carl and Diane stood a minute longer at the edge of the yard, not stepping closer, just standing the way you stand at the edge of a church that has finished a service you were not quite part of. Then Diane lifted her hand to Ray in a small wave. Ray lifted his hand back. Carl put his arm around her shoulders. They turned and walked slowly to their pickup truck. They did not look back again. Ray watched them drive away down the quiet street until the truck turned the corner and was gone, and he stood there another long minute after that, because a man's eyes need a minute sometimes. He thought about a girl named Emma who had been 5 years old in the summer of 2005 and who was ashes on a shelf in Billings, and who had once made him promise in a hospital bed that he would not be sad forever. He had broken that promise for 20 years. "Emma," he said out loud to the quiet street. "Honey, your dad kept his promise this time. Your dad is home." A cardinal called from the maple tree. From the backyard, a small voice he had come to know better than his own said, "Mr. Bear, come look, there's a squirrel." Ray Dalton smiled. "Coming, kid," he called back, and he walked around the side of his own house into the late afternoon sun, into the rest of his life. The weeks that followed were slow and careful, in the way that real recoveries are slow and careful. Lily slept badly for a while. She woke at 2, sometimes 3, with a thin, high cry that meant the dream about the black van had come back. Ray would stand barefoot in her doorway in an old t-shirt and sweatpants and say her name softly until she woke all the way, and then he would sit in the little chair he had bought from the thrift store and hold her hand through the side of the bed, and he would not leave until she was asleep again. On the bad nights, he would still be sitting there at dawn. Patch at the garage noticed the dark half-circles under Ray's eyes and did not say anything about them, just put fewer hard jobs on Ray's board and told him when it was time to go home, and Ray would go home. The first day of kindergarten came in the middle of August, a blue day with the sky scrubbed clean. Ray walked her to the corner in her red backpack, the one Diane had bought her a lifetime earlier, and she held his hand the whole way. At the corner, he knelt down. "You scared?" he said. "A little." "That's all right, kid. A little scared is good. It means you know something important is about to happen." "What if they don't like me?" "Then they don't know what they're looking at." She looked at him for a long second. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck. She held on tight. He held on tighter. He held on the way a man holds on to a thing he almost lost and never intends to lose again. "Okay," she said, finally letting go. "Okay, Mr. Bear, I'm ready." She walked up to the school bus by herself. She turned at the top step and waved at him. He waved back. The bus pulled away. Ray Dalton stood on that corner in Cedar Falls with his hands in his pockets and watched the bus take his little girl away down Maple Street. The first thing he had ever seen of her had been on a street called Maple, and now she was riding away down another one, and this time when she looked out the window, she was smiling, and this time when she came back, she would be coming back home to him, and this time he thought the promise was going to hold. He walked home the long way past the diner. Martha was already at the window. She raised her coffee pot at him in a salute. He raised his hand back. He had the rest of his life to go live now. It did not feel like a long time. It felt like exactly the right amount. He went home to paint the porch railing before the bus brought her back.